Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and this week we got yet another build for the War Within Alpha. With a brand new build, we also got a new wave of invites into the alpha, so check your Battle.net to see if you got in. But if you haven't, I did hear a rumor that a beta is right around the corner, as they're setting up some more endgame prep work for the beta update with an addition of new affixes and rewards for the Mythic Plus season. As for this build, however, we did see a ton of new class changes for just about everybody, though the class favorites such as the Death Knights, Mages, and Warlocks got the biggest bulk of them. And Death Knights in particular got the biggest update this week, as this class just continues to win week after week as they keep improving on their class and spec talent trees. As previous builds help reinforce Unholy and Frost Death Knight, with this week focusing primarily on Blood, and now the deadly trifecta that is the Unholy, Frost, and Blood Death Knights are looking so much better over in this alpha update. And for this video, I wanted to do a full-on Death Knight overview of some of these most recent changes. As always, if you guys want to see more regular class updates such as these over on the War Within Alpha, be sure to follow the channel. We'll keep covering them regularly, but otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, before I dive into some of the more exciting stuff coming for the spec of Blood Death Knights in particular, I first want to cover some of the smaller things that have happened for all the different hero specs of Death Knight, from Rider of the Apocalypse, Deathbringer, and Sinlain, a small update for Unholy, as well as a small update for Frost as well. Starting off with the Riders of the Apocalypse, as I summon these riders, every single one of them has gotten buffed up in one way or another in this recent build. So, for example, Trollbane's Obliterate damage has been buffed by 33%, but his Obliterate cast frequency buffed up by 100% to make him a little bit better when it comes to overall combat proficiency. Morgraine, on the other hand, has a very useful Death and Decay aura, but his actual damage output has been a little bit undermined, so Morgraine's Heartstrike damage is being amplified by 250% to make sure that he is a little bit more in line with all of the other riders. When it comes to Whitemane, her Death Coil ability is being amplified by 100%, although her biggest benefit comes from the Undeath Dot, which is actually quite a sizable bit of your overall damage. Nazgrim saw a very similar change to Morgraine, where his Scourge Strike damage frequency is also being increased by 100%, but also the damage of the Scourge Strike is being increased by 100% as well. So overall, all of the Riders of the Apocalypse are just a little bit better. As for the Sinlain hero talents, we do have a slight adjustment to the talent of Incite Terror, which has been updated, where Vampiric Strike, Hard Strike, Scourge Strike all cause the target to take 1% increased shadow damage up to 5% for 15 seconds. Vampiric Strike benefits 300% more from this effect, which makes it the must-have ability whenever you play in the Sinlain playstyle. Now, this does mean that if you're standing in someone like, let's say, Death and Decay, as you're cleaving multiple targets with Clawing Shadows, you are applying Incite Terror to every enemy that you cleave, so maintaining this debuff is going to be quite easy. But if you're able to cleave multiple targets at the same time while pressing your Vampiric Strike ability, that's going to amplify quite a bit of overall cleave in the long term. And it's quite a noticeable bit of overall damage as well. As for the Deathbringer, we've seen just a slight few AoE updates, such as Wave of Souls, which primarily there to do damage to multiple targets at once. The damage of this ability has been increased by 50%, as well as the second sight from Exterminate that primarily is there to do AoE damage. Now, when it comes to the actual Unholy Death Knight specific changes, we have two new talents, one of them being a very exciting addition of Festering Scythe. Every 20 Festering Wounds you burst empowers your next Festering Strike to become a Festering Scythe for 12 seconds, where Festering Scythe allows you to sweep through all enemies within 14 yards in front of you, dealing pure shadow damage instead of physical damage, and inflicting the targets with 2 to 3 Festering Wounds, which allows you to spread Festering Wounds much easier, which also allows you to really synergize into a Festering Wounds focused build. And with how easy it is to spread Festering Wounds to multiple targets, especially if you play with talents such as Vile Contagion, you can actually get a Festering Scythe very quickly, and it looks something like this. This is a simple Scythe ability, very similar to what we've seen from some of the other abilities such as Frost Scythe, for example, but the effect allows you to essentially spread Festering Wounds very rapidly across multiple targets, and get the Scythe ability very quickly as well, which allows you a very interesting way of playing around with this type of rotation and this type of playstyle, where you're more regularly able to apply Festering Wounds to multiple targets. Now, the other talent in this update is going to be Decomposition, where Virulent Plague has a chance to abruptly flare up, dealing 100% of the damage it dealt to the target in the last 4 seconds. When this effect triggers, the duration of your active minions are increased by 1 second up to 3 seconds maximum. and decomposition procs fairly regularly. All I have to do is apply DOS to the target and then watch it kind of just proc here and there. And you can see how often it actually ends up hitting multiple targets at once. If I can find it, there you go. Triple cleave there on multiple enemies. This allows you to synergize into a disease-focused Death Knight with certain talents that can maybe even amplify the value of some of your basic disease abilities. But also it allows you to kind of fuse diseases and your undead horde together, which allows you to make a hybrid build instead of just having to focus on one or the other. And then we have a really quick update for Frost Death Knight, where we have a talent that eventually leads into Breathless and Dragosa, which has been Hyperpyrexia. At least, hopefully I'm saying it as closely as possible. But with Hyper, your runic power spending abilities have a 30% chance to additionally deal 30% of the damage dealt over 4 seconds. So, with Breathless and Dragosa, this makes all the sense in the world, where Breathless and Dragosa just breathes at the target over and over and over with a fairly high chance of proccing, since it constantly keeps consuming your runic power. However, Hyper can also be utilized with other talents as well. So for example, with a talent such as Arctic Assault, Consuming Kill Machine fires off a free Glacial Advance through the target, and technically Glacial Advance is a runic power ability. So if, let's say, you are standing in front of multiple enemies at once, and all I'm gonna do is press Howling Blast into Obliterate just to see if it gets any procs, as I obliterate and I get a free proc of Glacial Advance, you should hopefully see Hyperpyrexia popping up, at least on this train dummy right here. There we go. So it does proc, it does actually work. But where this ability could synergize, besides just, Hyper and Breathless Dragosa combo, but potentially also Shattering Blade, which increases the damage of your Frost Strike. So if you have all 5 stacks of Razor Ice and you Frost Strike, and if you actually do get Hyper proc on it, you could actually get a solid bit of additional frost damage against the target, which could create for a more interesting combo that allows Hyper to be a talent that you don't normally fully invest all the way down into, but maybe just enough just to pick it up. But this one is easily going to make things such as Breathless and Dragosa just a little bit more powerful. And now I want to move on to the star of today's update, which is being the Blood Death Knight, as the Blood DK hero spec tree has gotten through quite a change. It's not completely different, but you'll notice a handful of things. As part of this update, what they really wanted to do for the Blood DK tree is to make it easier for you to pick and choose and customize your talents, and so many classes in Dragonflight are bogged down with way too many nodes that require 2 talent points to fully invest into. So you'll notice a huge portion of the Blood DK talents, except for some of these early gates here, are going to be only a single talent point cost. Things such as Red Thirst, single talent point cost, but retains full value as if it was 2 points. Things such as Shattering Bone, the same thing applies here too. And a lot of these talents are going to be in that same vein in order to give you more freedom. Also, certain talents are a must-have for every single build of Death Knight, so they're simply given to the spec of Death Knight automatically. Things such as Crimson Scourge, which is what allows you to be able to place a free Death and Decay upon your targets, but also Death's Caress, which is a fantastic ability for the cost with a short cooldown, but also a great way for you to be able to regenerate 2 Bone Chill charges in a single global. And from there, they've done a lot more optimization to make Blood Death Knight just a little bit better. And I'll go over all of the new talents that you will see row by row, starting with the 3rd row immediately with Bone Collector. One of the things that they wanted for Blood Death Knights to be able to, do is easily regenerate Bone Chill charges, and already Blood Death Knights do that pretty well, but Bone Collector is one of those things that rewards you to play into your class mechanics. Gripping enemies, displacing them in places, being able to grip enemies closer to interrupt a cast or just simply move them, but also things such as your Abomination Limb and even Gorfin's Grasp. All of those things will now benefit from Bone Collector, which allows you to aggressively grip and not be worried about gripping an enemy that could potentially hurt you, since this will just generate your Bone Chill charge, which I like to see. In the next row right after, we have Ossified Vitriol. We talked earlier how Death Knights have way too many easy ways to generate Bone Chill charges with Bone Collector, but also with things such as Death's Caress, but also with Dance and Rune Weapon be able to provide you free Bone Chill charges. Death Knights just have way too many ways to be able to generate them effectively. So Mara Ren kind of sometimes take a bit of a backseat, even though it's supposed to be a primary way of generating Bone Chill charges. But with Ossified, as you lose Bone Chill charges, whether you consume them yourself with things such as Tombstone or when they get consumed naturally during combat, it ends up stacking the damage buff for your Morrowind. And at a current level of 78, if you end up getting full stacks of your Bone Chill charges and you end up consuming them with things such as Tombstone, Your next Morrowind is going to do 75% more damage, and it's essentially going to do about similar type of damage as a Death Strike, where Morrowind fully buffed up did 44, almost 45,000 damage. Your Death Strike hit for about 60,000, so they're generally a little bit closer to one another, although Death Strike has a bunch of other elements that do end up amplifying its output, but it does give Morrowind at least a little bit more of a room to grow as an ability, making it a little bit better in single target as a physical output skill, but also as a gate talent point that takes you into things such as Relish in Blood, Perseverance of the Ebon Blade, and Hemostasis. Over in the middle, however, taking up a little bit easier node to kind of talent into is Gorfian's Grasp, and I really want Blood Death to be able to pick this up a little bit more easily, where under normal situations in Dragonflight, you wouldn't really pick up Gorfian's Grasp. It's just a little bit too expensive of where it's located, and there's other towns that you would want to invest into, but now you can talent at Gorfian's while grabbing all of the other important skills you need towards the capstones. Gorfian still functions the same, but it has a different upgrade node now with Titan Grasp. Gorfian's Grasp is cooldown is reduced by 30 seconds, that's pretty normal, but it now silences enemies within 3 seconds. For 30 seconds would be insane, but for 3 seconds. So if you do end up using Gorfian's, yeah, it silences enemies. And it's going to be interesting to see if this ability will end up silencing things such as bosses in the future. I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to, but it'll be interesting if Gorfian Grasp essentially worked like a second kick for Blood Death Knights. I think that'll be... I guess we'll find out once raids are available, but that is just where my mind went to immediately. Either way, Gorfian's is going to give Death Knights even more utility with this Titan Grasp ability. Being able to not only displace casters to you, but also silence them in place allows your team in the Mythic Plus run, for example, to chain a bunch of crowd control from the silence into a fire breath by a mage and maybe follow up with a knockup from an evoker. There's so much cool stuff that you can do with this ability, and I kind of like that Death Knights are really able to lean into this full creeping nature that makes up all the specs of Death Knights. On the opposite side of that talent, however, we have Reinforced Bones, which increases the armor gain from Bone Shield by 10%, but also allows Bone Shield to stack up to 2 additional times. This ends up being kind of sort of helpful when we go into our capstones. From your Tombstone down into Shattered Bones, we have the new and maybe improved Bone Storm. It no longer consumes runic power, so it allows you to spam Death Strike as much as you want to. Instead, what this ability does is consumes your Bone Shield charges up to 10 maximum to create a whirl of bone and gore that does shatter damage to enemies but also heals you like before. This ability lasts 1 second per Bone Shield charge spent and will rapidly regenerate Bone Shield charges every 1 second. So as you get yourself a full set of Bone Shields available, drop down on Death and Decay, press the ability, and you'll actually lose all of your Bone Shield charges with the ability rapidly trying to regenerate them as fast as possible. This does make it a little bit more of an aggressive move in general as an ability, because you are going to be losing your full-fledged mitigation output for a short moment when you use it, but you'll be trading out quite a bit of additional damage, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how not losing out on runic power when using the ability of Bone Storm might make it better, might make it worse. It definitely is a bit more of a riskier play, losing out on your prime mitigation output. Continuing on with capstones, we have a new and improved versions of Blood Drinker and Consumption. Blood Drinker becomes a defensive ability. Not only does it siphon health from the enemy, which does decent single target damage, sorta, but it also now reduces the amount of damage the target deals to you while they get drained by 20%, and for 5 additional seconds after fully draining the enemy. It's almost like the Death Knight is able to drain the essence out of the foe to make it feel weaker as they lose blood, and then they hit the Death Knight a little bit less harder. But it allows Blood Drinker to become a solid defensive ability that Blood Death is going to utilize every 30 seconds, and I like changes like these. We also got things such as Consumption, which isn't going to be losing out to Blood Drinker anytime soon, where Blood Drinker is better for single target, Consumption is going to be better for AoE. On a 30-second cooldown, it does a bit of physical damage, heals you for a little bit, that's not important, but now it also causes you Blood Plague damage to occur 50% more quickly for 8 seconds, and generate your 2 runes. I think the resource generation in general is going to be pretty solid, because this allows you to generate quite a few runes as well, to be able to send them into more hard strikes or a clutch Morrowind, or use it for whatever other reasons. But the Blood Plague combo I think could be more interesting. You see, as a debuff, Blood Plague ability is something that drains health from the foe as you extract their essence back into the Death Knight himself. This is the way that you actually literally heal off of the target. And Blood Plague has a couple of different talents that can synergize with its overall output, from things such as rapid decomposition, where Blood Plague and Death and Decay deal their damage 18% more often, and Blood Plague leeches 50% more health. And from the talent of Coagulopathy, you do get a little bit additional damage from Blood Plague as you Death Strike, increasing the damage up until 5 stacks. And then you also have the Deathbringer hero spec that allows Blood Plague H hands to deal Shadowfrost damage. But also you have Wither Away, which allows Blood Plague to deal its damage in half the duration, so further speeding up the amount of output that you can get out of Blood Plague. What I'm trying to say is Consumption now actually has a bit of a different benefit besides just being an ability that doesn't actually get picked as a talent, as it now synergizes with your diseases, a concept or mechanic that doesn't necessarily get super fixated on by Blood Death Knights, but now can be gained and utilized. But also the additional resources could make Consumption maybe a good alternative in AoE content. And altogether, this ends up creating a playstyle where Blood Death Knights feels quite powerful going into the next expansion. Not only is it getting a full new array of class talents that allow it to be a little bit tankier and get a little bit more customizability when it comes to some of your talent options, but now the spec tree grants you additional utility, but also a bit more freedom in how you end up customizing some of your talented options. But so far, some of the synergies and the hero specs and some of the ways that you can combine them together on Blood feels pretty powerful to play around with. And if you were to look beyond Blood Death Knight at the entire whole array of things coming to the class of Death Knight in general for the War Within, it looks like a fairly complete package that's definitely worth noting. Not saying that you should start prepping to main a Death Knight going forward in War Within, but definitely keep this class in your radar, because between Unholy, Frost, and now Blood changes, it gets me actually very excited for the class of Death Knight going forward. But doesn't really matter what I think. I want to hear you guys' opinions in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on some of these Death Knight changes, from the smaller updates for Frost as well as Unholy, or the different hero spec adjustments this week, but also the rework that's coming to the spec tree of the Blood Death Knight? And out of the 3 Death Knight specs so far, which one are you the most excited about to pick up as a potential main, or even just as an ult to mess around with for War Within? Let me know in the comment. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video, or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.